Bledsoe was arrested.
Patrick Montgomery was in court.
Jonathan Manapa will stay in federal custody.
No, I don't take responsibility at all.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. So 36-year-old California resident Sean McHugh is one I've been waiting for. He posted on Facebook in late December of 2020, and he wrote in part, quote, "Going to D.C. Jan 5, 6, 7 to fight." Also, quote, "If this doesn't make you want to get up and storm Congress and rip people out of office, then you need to move to China." Then, early in the morning on January 6, McHugh wrote, quote, "1776 will commence again January 6, 2021. Will be wild." Later that day, McHugh headed to the Capitol. He had bear spray with him, which the prosecutor pointed out could cause irreversible eye damage to humans. It is 50% stronger than the pepper spray used by the police. And even before Trump's rally was over, McHugh was already encouraging everyone to head to the Capitol. He was using a bullhorn, and he was telling people basically to go attack the building. He yelled, quote, "We have the power in numbers. March on Congress directly after Trump's speech." Then, as McHugh walked to the Capitol, he was recording himself, and he said, quote, right now, we're storming the Capitol. We're going to Congress. We're going to let them know that we don't want them to accept the Electoral College votes. There are already a couple states that are trying to decertify as of last night. They have to listen to us. There's so many people. So McHugh followed the mob onto the Capitol grounds, and this is after they breached the barricades. He maneuvered his way to the front of the police line, and he was pacing back and forth, and he was leading chants of "Whose house? Our house." And he was also, again, encouraging the mob. He was yelling things like, "Come on, let's go, bring it in." Eventually, that police line collapsed, and McHugh headed closer to the building. And as he approached more officers standing behind barriers, he and another man grabbed a barricade and they forcibly pulled it away from an officer, and they tried to hold, the officer was trying to hold on to it. They pulled it several feet away from the police line before two other officers, or that one and another officer, jumped out and grabbed it and put it back in place. About 10 minutes after that, McHugh pulled out his bear repellent, and he shot two long, continuous sprays at the police line. And they say he hit several officers, and those officers were forced to leave. They had to go decontaminate due to the pain, and they couldn't see. One of the officers was temporarily blinded by it. So that helped to break the police line, so that caused others in the mob to become more aggressive and push through. And then after that, McHugh continued pacing back and forth in front of the police line, yelling through the bullhorn. Among other things, he called the police cowards. He accused them of protecting communists. And he said, quote, "You know what's behind us? The Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is behind us." And these are my favorite comments made by McHugh because they're so hypocritical. He said, quote, "You are protecting pedophiles, crooks, communists. You guys like protecting pedophiles?" And quote, "Nazis followed orders." The pedophile comments are very rich coming from this guy because he literally served time in prison for the statutory rape of a 14-year-old child, when he was 23 years old. And as for the Nazi comment, all I have to say is, be there will be wild. Yeah. Anyway, at one point, McHugh grabbed onto and tugged on another barricade. And then sometime after that, McHugh took part in what was known, or what's now become known as, the billboard attack against the police. I've mentioned this, but it's been a while since I talked about it. This was a Trump sign that they said was something like 10 to 15 feet wide. It stood several feet tall, and it had these giant metal casters attached to the bottom of it. They said that the casters were the size of a man's head. So the mob picked this thing up, they carried it toward the police line, and then they used it like a battering ram. They rammed it into the police to try to break the police line. Well, McHugh assisted in shoving that big giant sign and those casters toward the police. So following the Capitol attack, McHugh bragged about his actions online. In one post he wrote in part, quote, "I unloaded a whole can of bear spray on a line of cops. I got 3 of them down really, really good." Also, quote, "We stormed them and we took Congress." And quote, "I was there at the front." So McHugh was arrested on May 27th of 2021, and in a superseding indictment, he was charged with assaulting officers, civil disorder, 2 counts of assaulting officers with a dangerous weapon, obstructing an official proceeding, entering restricted grounds with a dangerous weapon, disorderly conduct on restricted grounds with a dangerous weapon, physical violence on restricted grounds with a dangerous weapon, disorderly conduct on Capitol grounds, and physical violence on Capitol grounds. McHugh refused a plea deal. He opted for a stipulated bench trial, and he stipulated to a couple of crimes, assaulting officers with a dangerous weapon and obstructing an official proceeding. Well, in April of 2023, the judge found McHugh guilty on both of those counts. So he was looking at up to 20 years in prison, 3 years of probation, and $250,000 in fines. And this time the prosecutor requested a pretty decent sentence. They asked for 10 years and 3 months behind bars. Also 3 years of probation, $2,000 in restitution, and a fine of $73,000, which that relates to the amount of money he's raised online. I find it so ironic that these so-called Save the Children, Q-Loon, Trump supporters are sending their hard-earned cash to a convicted sex abuser, right? And once again, you know, we've got, them partaking in socialism, right? Crowdfunding their legal fees and to help them pay their bills. They're all socialists at heart. You just can't make this shit up. And the statutory rape, by the way, was far from his only crime. You guys need to get comfortable because this is definitely going to take a while. This is a very lengthy criminal history. In 2006, McHugh was convicted and sentenced to jail for possession of a stolen vehicle. While he was on probation for that crime, in the same year, he was convicted and sentenced to jail for receiving stolen property and petty theft. In 2007, McHugh was convicted of obstructing or resisting a public officer, and he was sentenced to probation for that crime. 2 years later, he was convicted and sentenced to additional probation for driving with a suspended license. In 2010, he was sentenced to 210 days in jail and 4 years of probation for that statutory rape and also contributing to the delinquency of a minor. McHugh violated his probation for those crimes, so he was sentenced to an additional 45 days in jail. That same year, 2010, McHugh was sentenced to jail and more probation for driving under the influence. He violated the terms of that probation twice. And then later that year, McHugh was convicted and sentenced again to only 48 days in jail for domestic violence. He apparently punched the woman, the victim, in the head multiple times. There were witnesses. And then he broke the taillights on her car. McHugh failed to participate in the court-ordered domestic violence program. And as far as I can tell, they did nothing to him for refusing to take part in that. 1 month after he beats up his girlfriend, he's convicted and jailed again for driving once again with a suspended license. He violated the terms of that probation for that crime 3 times. Then in June of 2011, McHugh was convicted and sentenced to probation for vandalism. He later violated that probation. In 2014, McHugh was convicted and sentenced to 45 days in jail and probation for entering a non-commercial dwelling. And in the same month, he was convicted and given a suspended sentence for another DUI. While he was still on probation for that crime, he was convicted and sentenced for another DUI in 2018. So, yeah, here we have another repeat offender for Trump. There are many. He really attracts the best, doesn't he? And just as with his apricot antichrist, Donald Trump, McHugh hasn't filed taxes, they say, since 2016. So U.S. District Judge John Bates presided over McHugh's case, and I couldn't locate any details about what was said at the sentencing hearing, but in the end, McHugh was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison and 3 years of probation, and he was ordered to pay $2,000 in restitution and a $5,000 fine. Given his criminal history, he absolutely deserved every bit of that 10 years. He has been given chance after chance for nearly 2 decades. He clearly has issues, or he thinks that rules don't apply to him. Maybe both. You know, whatever the case may be, I have no doubt we're going to be seeing and hearing about this guy again in the future. And not in a good way. Not in a like, oh, did you hear Sean McHugh cured cancer? Not in that kind of way. It's going to be more like, should have locked his ass up for 20 years when we had the chance. That kind of way. Anyway, I will let you guys know when I hear more about him. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please donate if possible. Love you all. Take care. Talk with you soon.